While everyone is extremely excited about what's happening with the new expansions, Chaos Rising had a very good release, prices held at launch, and now they're slowly starting to climb. Of course, everyone is still watching what's happening with the big 2026 expansion, which is Ascended Heroes. We're watching ETB prices rising very quickly, and the prices of other products, which are slowing down a bit, but booster prices are getting closer to 15 euros per booster, which for such a young product is a very, very high price. And now the question is, are we putting too much weight right now on these newest products? But what did I want to talk about today? We've already talked a lot about Ascended, we've talked about Chaos, and even about Pitch Black. Today, I really wanted to talk about a whole group of products where I think a lot is happening, and almost no one sees it. And that's not surprising to me. But if we watch this market closely, we can notice a certain repeatable process happening, something that takes place once every 2 or 3 years, and where the important things are often noticed only after the entire process is over. And today, I want to talk about a product line made up of boxes and products from an era that is not even the previous one, Scarlet and Violet, but the one before it, Sword and Shield. And while the absolute kings of Sword and Shield are well known, including, among others, Evolving Skies, around that expansion and that absolute peak, we also had a series of smaller sets that had their chase cards. But from the perspective of today's audience expectations and how people judge the cards inside a set, these sets would probably be described as fairly average. First and foremost, Silver Tempest, an expansion that, to my knowledge, had one of the largest print runs. We can estimate that by looking at the number of copies of the Lugia Altart card, which is also basically the only main chase card of this set. There were a lot of boxes, and they were available for many, many months across various reprints. Personally, I was still buying Silver Tempest boxes for 200 euros in spring and summer last year. These were boxes people remembered seeing on shelves. They weren't associated with anything special at all. But compared with the next box I want to mention today, Silver Tempest is still the one you could call a bit more attractive, precisely because of that very big chase card. The next one, which doesn't have that chase card and is something of an ugly duckling of the Sword and Shield era, is Astral Radiance, another expansion printed in huge quantities during a period of average popularity, and one that lagged far behind the more attractive boxes of its time, like Evolving Skies for sure, and largely Fusion Strike 2. The box simply didn't sell well. We know there were very good deals on these boxes when those reprints were being produced, basically at the turn of the Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet eras. I didn't manage to buy those boxes back then. I bought them a bit later, still around 200 to 250 euros. And the third box in this trio, another expansion that I'd say is to some extent a bit forgotten, is of course Brilliant Stars. Brilliant Stars, out of all three, was, in my opinion, the best received at launch, and also probably the most attractive and best remembered box. The price reflects that too. Here, of course, we have the Charizard Chase card Fighting Venusaur, a very, very popular card, and also one that allowed this expansion to stand out nicely and offer something unique compared with the surrounding sets. But why am I telling you all this? After all, these aren't new sets. They're already a good few years old, and honestly, nothing major is happening with them right now. We don't have any massive days with hundreds of transactions. On the contrary, these boxes are slowly trickling out in both the United States and Europe. That's exactly why I wanted to talk about this so-called trickling today. All these boxes are currently far away from the spotlight and the bright lights we see, for example, around the Mega Evolution block. We definitely see that spotlight around the sets that are currently the most desired and discussed. But here, it's the opposite. We have 1 or 2 transactions a day, which, contrary to appearances, changes a lot. Why? Because today, when we look at Scarlet and Violet boxes, especially the less attractive ones, like Paradox Rift, Temporal Forces, Stellar Crown, and maybe also Twilight Masquerade to some extent, we still think about boxes that probably won't get another reprint. but we don't feel any strong pressure to race against time to get them if we want to have them in our diversified portfolio. However, with Sword and Shield boxes, we have very smoothly moved from the stage we currently have with those slightly weaker Scarlet and Violet boxes to a point where there really aren't many of these boxes left. And I'm talking about the situation in the United States too. On TCG Player, we can see how relatively small buyouts of just a few or a dozen or so boxes have pushed prices up by even several dozen percent. All these boxes have been having quite strong runs lately, especially in the United States. And as usual, I'm also looking at Europe. In Europe, these processes are different because reprints and availability were different. But at a certain point, these processes start to converge and level out to some extent. For example, we saw this with Evolving Skies, where just a year ago, the price could differ between the US and Europe by 20 or 30%. Right now, because there are relatively few transactions and not many boxes available on both continents, you could say the price is starting to level out. And for those who still want to buy these boxes, the bad news is that it's leveling out toward the higher price, because through a kind of small-scale arbitrage, those cheaper boxes from Europe can easily find their way to the US as well. And what kind of quantities are we even talking about? Earlier, we were talking about Ascended and Chaos Rising, meaning expansions where every day we can see dozens, if not hundreds of transactions on large e-commerce platforms. In the case of Sword and Shield boxes, we're dealing with much, much smaller volumes. We're dealing with 1 or 2 transactions a day. But when we look at Card Market, and in a sense TCG Player too, although being in Europe I obviously look at Card Market much more, I see that the number of boxes left at still rational prices, meaning prices not too far from recent transaction prices, is really only a dozen or maybe 20-something boxes right now. And we have transactions practically every day, sometimes every 2 days. So I can leave the math to you, because you know what happens when there are 20, maybe 30 boxes at a certain price level, and 1, 2, sometimes even 3 boxes disappear in a day. Let's assume it's a few boxes a week. When we look at the numbers in this case, obviously one of 3 things can happen. First, people may completely stop buying these boxes, and it could become a dead product, like some old Magic boxes, which exist, but almost nobody is looking for anymore. In the case of Pokemon, that seems rather unlikely. The second scenario is that people who have these boxes hidden away will test the theory that everyone has closets stuffed with these products and is just waiting to take them out, flood the market with them, and tank the price. In the case of Sword and Shield boxes, both scenarios seem relatively unlikely. First of all, people aren't heavily loaded with these boxes. Of course, some of these boxes will probably come out of closets, because people who, for example, have 1 or 2 units listed on Card Market or TCG Player may often have 8 or 10 of them. So it's not like these boxes will simply run out in 2 or 3 weeks and we'll be buying Silver Tempest for 1,000 euros. And in a few months, the same thing may happen as with products that were slowly bought out, while supply wasn't being replenished. For example, we saw this with the 151 set. Those horrendously high prices, whether for UPCs or ETBs, come from the lack of supply, combined with more and more people simply wanting to have this product in their collection, and from the limited reality of what people actually have in their closets, not the anecdotes where everyone supposedly has entire warehouses and garages full of this stuff. Reality shows that these products are simply starting to disappear from the market. And of course, as the price increases, meaning as those still reasonably priced boxes are bought out, the sales volume will obviously have to drop. People who are ready to pay $600 or 500 euros for a Brilliant Stars box today probably won't be just as willing. In fact, they almost certainly won't be willing to buy at much higher prices once this product has been drained. But even if we look at old boxes that seem completely unattractive simply because of what they contain, like those slightly older Darkness Ablaze boxes, or even boxes from the Sun and Moon era. And I'm not talking about the most high-end ones at all, but rather the more boring ones that people easily forgot about. We can see that the number of transactions drops from several a week to several a month. And in the case of the rarest boxes, the ones that are truly close to being extinct, there may be only 2 or 3 transactions a year. That's not much, but when we realize that these transactions are already happening at very, very elevated prices, which reflect the fact that many products are already in very, very limited supply across practically the entire continent, the price obviously reflects that. There aren't many buyers for this, but they do exist. They often buy these boxes purely for collecting or investment purposes, and the contents of these boxes don't matter that much anymore. So what does all this actually mean for us today? I wanted to talk about this in this video to show that some of the things we later read about on Reddit, see in videos from various YouTubers, or see on Twitter often have processes behind them that actually happen very quietly and completely without any media hype. So before we actually wake up in a few months and see that these boxes are completely gone and the prices seem completely detached from what we remember, let's sometimes take a closer look. Let's look for things we'd like to have in our collection and things we already have when we're wondering which part of them we might trade or sell. Let's look at what's happening with these products, because especially with products that have been out of official print for a long time, these kinds of anomalies happen in this market. They happen regularly, they've happened for many years, and for those who are alert and patient, they create opportunities to build a collector portfolio in a way that generates some value and lets us enjoy our hobby longer and more profitably. Thanks for today. Let us know in the comments if you also have these boxes hidden in your closets and you're just waiting for a high enough price tag to release them. If this fascinates you too, share your thoughts in the comments. Take care.